start the pod by saying happy birthday to my old friend Peter. You know, Peter, it's been almost 15 years, if you can believe that.
Wow, has it really?
It
Oh,
has.
damn.
I met you at what, McGeorge School of Law, uh, fucking when I was 18 years old, man.
Dude, you'd come over to my apartment and we would just rage. Do you remember that? We'd have like multiple guitars and just like a bunch of people and just kind of like randomly kind of rage in the middle of a very like subdued environment. It was kind of funny.
Yeah,
My
I feel
neighbors must
like
have just hated me.
I was reminiscing on it like a week ago, and I feel like we raged in like a very literary way.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure.
Hang out and listen to records and drink cheap wine and talk about the world.
It is kind of crazy that we're still like a little cohort of folks, ever
Oh
since the
man,
time.
one of my one of my greatest blessings in life, man, to have homies like nigh on, 15 years. It's like it's quite a privilege.
It is. It really is. And one thing that this is our segue maybe into today's topic, which is Mr. Andrew Tate. We're all kind of like dudes, I'm not sure if you've noticed, but we're all like dudes, right? And we all kind of do some self-help talks every now and then. We do a
Yep.
thing where we're kind of like, life is this, and here's how you do better, and like let's talk
Hmm.
about girls, and let's talk about drugs, let's talk about like whatever. So we're basically Andrew Tates, right? That's who we are.
Yeah.
We're mini Andrew Tates, right?
Yeah, it's just three Andrew Tates hanging out, angry at the world, angry
Well,
at
he's like
women.
a big feminist guy, right? Isn't that his whole thing? He's a big like women's rights guy. It's all for like, know your place men and like respect women. That's his
Right.
deal, right? From what I gather.
Yeah, respect women in a very small cage.
Oh God. So, I don't know if you want to like jump in with your thoughts because I'm curious. I'm gonna be like very anti Andrew Tate. I'm gonna be like on the fuck him side of this.
Yeah.
I'm not sure where you fall exactly, but it's pretty easy for me to take the fuck you side. So I'm kind of let's hear your take on this guy.
Well, first of all, I love the guy. He's a
Okay,
scion.
here
He's a
we go.
scion of intelligent thought in this world. Dude, just
Brilliant.
yeah, dude, a much needed voice. You know
Right.
what I mean? Like, dude, one thing that I feel really deeply is that angry men just don't have a voice in our society and never
Oh,
have, right?
never. It's
No.
unbelievable.
No, I mean it's a
No
matriarchal
platforms.
society. No
Yeah.
platforms for angry men. You know what I'm saying? Nah. Okay. So for real, Andrew Tate, interesting character. I tried to take an open. Well, I wouldn't even say open-minded, but like a multifaceted approach to how I was kind of digging into his content this week and trying to understand. I think I made the fatal error of trying to understand the guy.
Okay. Yeah. I didn't even try.
No, it was interesting because, of course, I consumed a lot of the media around him, right? A lot of, and the kind of clamoring narrative is "fuck this guy," which is absolutely justified. Because first of all, let me just say "fuck this guy." Uh, the other thing, though, that I was really interested in, something that's kind of been a life's work for me, is wondering why that brand of angry masculinity ends up finding such a voice with young people. And I
Hmm.
have a lot of thoughts on that, and maybe we'll get into that stuff later. The thing that I was most kind of struck by was that, as I'm you hear the guy talk and he's easy to hate. And I ended up stumbling onto an Andrew Tate subreddit. Very few followers on it, but a lot of kind of like inspo posts where it's like, not unlike those like pictures of a mountain where it's like it's high but you can climb it. There was like a bunch of snippets of things that he said, and interestingly I found some of them to be pretty on point. It's, I think, out of context, some of the stuff that he's talking about resonates because it's a way that you can think about. He's into this kind of like work hard and make yourself better ethos, which is something that you and I share. It's just got a really unpalatable flavor, and it's mixed in with a lot of just kind of outrageous, hateful ideas that I don't know where they entered from. Yeah, so I'm trying to look at it from a couple different angles. I don't like the guy. I think he's kind of a pussy in a fundamental way. What are your thoughts on the dude? Give me your 20,000-foot view of this very short man.
Yeah,
very small man.
I mean, to me, it's really simple. I think that the guy, he developed a narrative of life when he was like 12 years old and stuck to it and never moved on from it. Because at some level, like every 12-year-old boy is like, oh, the world is boys versus girls. And you know what? Girls say they rule, but really it's a man's world and that sort of thing. And like what kind of like sticks out to me is how he doesn't actually care at all about the real world, real people, human beings. He cares about tropes and cliches. And so just as one note about this, like when he was talking to Hassan, the podcast guy, who also don't really like, but Andrew Tate was saying, women are worse drivers than men. Hassan was like, okay, the data shows actually, if you look it up, that women across the board are better drivers than men. And Andrew Tate's like, no, because in my experience, that's not true. It's like, okay, then cool, man. You're also wrong, you know?
Right.
And you're just like doing the thing that you made up a worldview when you're 12 years old and like everything was black and white and men versus women. And it's just so painfully boring and so dumb. And there's no nuance. And I mean, I don't know what sorts of women he hangs out with or whatever, you know, but like, you know, everyone is fine. Everyone is like doing their thing. But like literally the women in my life would take one look at that motherfucker and be like, dude, you're a dork. You're dumb.
You're gross.
You're gross and you're offensive. Like, go the fuck away. I don't care how much money you have, dude. Like, you're not someone I would even want to like walk into a grocery store with, let alone like call my significant other or anything like that. Women like are, you know, they are not stupid, and he thinks that women are stupid. And that's kind of like the fundamental thing about him. That's like, you know, if he has anything kind of fundamentally wrong, it's like kind of guys are stupid, because guys get on board with this whole thing of like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Like, okay, so little tangent.
Wait, let me ask you a question. How much, because one of his arguments recently, now that he's been canceled, which I find is funny, because a bunch of the podcasts where I listen to him speak, he goes, you know, very explicitly, he says, I mean everything that I say. Right. And then he gets canceled and he's like, actually, it's a character that I'm playing. Do you think any of it is artifice, or do you think that it's 100% he's, you know, in there?
Mm-hmm. What do I think?
Yeah. Do you think any of it's artifice? Do you think there's any credence to that? You think it's just pure cowardly backpedaling? What do you think?
I mean, I think he's just dumb. Like, I don't even think that he's clever enough to really craft a coherent other. That's kind of my take on the guy.
Yeah, I like that.
To still like hold on to my tangent that I will dive into, because I think it's kind of relevant, is that last night I was watching Bill Burr's new stand-up special on Netflix. And, you know, he kind of does the same thing of like a masculinity thing, right? But the whole thing is funny. It's all funny, and like in the funniness, it's all messy, and he finds little areas of truth that like make you laugh because you know it's funny, you know it's true, right? Nothing about Andrew Tate ever makes you laugh, and it's because he's not finding any truth there. There's no truth. He's finding very like old, tired cliches, and for some reason he's kind of shoving it down young boys' throats, because that is kind of what they want to hear, even though they know it's not true. They want to hear it because it justifies their insecurities. That's what he is to me. Like, I don't think he can make it as a stand-up comic, because I don't think he finds truths. I think he finds falsehoods and like dives into them and like doubles down and bites the bullet and won't leave the falsehoods despite everything else. Whereas like someone like Bill Burr, he will like go down the same like kind of uncomfortable rabbit holes, but he's gonna like poke at something that we're all like, ah ha ha, yeah, that's kind of true, right?
Right.
So
what
it's fun.
Well, kind of piggybacking on that, like, what do you think it is? And I have thoughts on this. What do you think is the reason why it does resonate so strongly with mostly younger boys, younger men, but obviously some like, of age men as well?
I think that that's a really hard question to answer, for one
Mm,
thing. And I do think that a lot of it does kind of come down to the fundamental immaturity of men and boys.
mm,
I mean, I remember looking back, and this is just like this is validated by psychology. Like, dudes do not really mature until they're like 25.
right.
And so part of being immature, and this is fine because this is just how it is, part of being immature as a young dude is seeing the world as a very black and white thing and seeing it as a struggle that
Mm,
everyone's out to get you and like you need to survive because the world is going to eat you alive and kill you if you don't. And then like
hmm
through that lens, you get all of this like self-help talk that is kind of like fulfilling and gratifying to you at that age. So, for
hmm
example, like you sent me a thing of Andrew Tate's that was like, oh, if you're ugly, but you still want to get laid, here's what you do. You get rich. And
Right,
like
right.
that's the dumbest of the dumbest advice ever because it's like, oh shit, why didn't I think of that? Oh
Damn.
yeah,
Oh,
okay, I just
right.
got to get
I
rich.
forgot.
Duh.
Oh my God.
Thank you, Andrew Tate, for telling me this. Right? All I gotta do is get
Luminary.
rich. And so that's fine, that's harmless, just stupid. But kind of like where I do think that is in this world of the Andrew Tate thing, that type of advice is actually truly harmful, is because the
Mm,
people who are going to eat up that advice, see that advice and eat it up, it's insecure young men, and they're
hmm
not going to think, oh, I'm ugly and I'm overweight, so I need to get rich to get laid because that's really what I want at this stage of my life.
Right.
They're not going to be like, oh, okay, so I need to get an engineering degree and really apply myself and do something very hard that's unsatisfying to me for many years, and then 20 years from
Right.
now, I'll be gratified by it. So get the engineering degree, go to med school, that sort of thing. It's not that. It's like get a Robinhood account and try to get rich quick off of like shitty penny stocks. That's what they're going to do, and they're going to like lose their money and then just spiral. That's way more the rational case for what's going to happen for that dumb advice of just get rich, bro.
Right.
And I think that that's unfortunate because the hard truth in life is like don't listen to this like YouTube self-help guy. Listen to like your parents, who are like
hmm
try to get the A even though it's really hard and it isn't
hmm
cool. Don't go out and drinking on Friday nights. Stay home and study. Like shit like that. Like imagine
Right.
if Andrew Tate was like, have a boring life in your early 20s so you don't fuck things up, and then
Right.
you'll get the girl when you're 26.
Right.
When you're worth something and have something to offer her, because now you have nothing to offer her.
Well, I think that to me that is where the kind of pinch point happens, where it is speaking to young men, is the value added, right? Like the
Mhm.
idea that I think that there's been an epidemic of sexual entitlement over the
Mm.
last maybe 5,000 years. Like I think there's been an idea, and the idea is justified in certain realities where, men, especially in the last 100 years in America, have been able to overcome women's resistance by brute force. And it hasn't been a negotiation. It's been it's been a pushing game. And oh, if I can push as hard as you can. I mean, we saw that so much in the 90s and the early 2000s with pickup artists, right? Like you just have
Yeah.
to overcome the no, man. And in a weird way, sometimes that works, that still works. And maybe it speaks to a certain type of mentality. I don't know who raised these people, the men and the women both, that this works for. But I think that right now we're seeing, and this kind of gets into why I think it might be speaking to young men, is, I think it's kind of twofold. One of the reasons is, I think, because women are enjoying a larger market share in popular culture and power. The power dynamic has definitely shifted, where you're seeing, and like, you know, I have thoughts on this too, I won't really get into, but like you're seeing women capture their sexuality more. You're seeing that happen younger. You're seeing women be able to use it in a way in society that allows them to get attention in a way that was totally ostracized and absolutely not okay, even 10 or 15 years ago. And that is part of what's shifting the balance. I mean, part of it is just cultural, that we're having a woke movement where we're seeing a lot of people saying, well, you know, we don't just need equity, we need power. We need power in the society. And I think in a situation where you're a young boy and you're trying to figure out how to get a girl's attention or get a girl to like you, it's already a really difficult game. It's already a game that requires quite a bit of finesse and skill. And even when I think we were in an age where men, the dominant perspective was that you just need to overpower the no, even then it takes a degree of finesse and skill and courage to get through that. But then once the power dynamic is evening, you're really in a complicated game. You're not in a checkers game anymore, you're in a chess game. And that is frustrating by its very nature. That is frustrating, to try to find the connection point with another human being, and maybe even more so with a human being of the opposite sex. And when you're in the depth of that frustration, I really like this girl, you know, or I really want this or whatever, I think it's easy. You want the pill, you want the pharmaceutical, you want the thing that's going to allow you instant access to the thing that you want, that's going to cure the ill that you maybe don't want to see in yourself, that's not allowing you to connect with this other person. And I think when someone breaks it down to this simplistic level of like, if you're poor, get buff, you know what I mean? Like, you know, shit like that, you're like, oh, that's the OxyContin. I'm in pain and I can use this as a way to get out of pain, and maybe it'll work at some point, or maybe it'll work with a certain type of person. But I think that one of the reasons why it resonates with young men especially is because that is such a frustrating time when you're trying to figure out your own internal landscape that allows you to map out the connection points with the people that you want to connect with, men and women, you know. I think that's part of it. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, one of my themes that I just talk about these days is that we're kind of in a transition period with a lot of things, and maybe we won't be forever at this point, but we're like, young men, I think, are getting a ton of mixed signals.
Right.
Whereas I think that women are still getting a fairly coherent signal of go to college and get a good job, because for a very long time, women weren't able to do that. And in fact, in many parts of the world, they still can't. So take advantage of this thing where you get a great job, right? And that's great, straightforward advice. And on top of that, they can still, you know, do like a marry up thing, which also, like, historically is how women did get wealthy, was they married up, right? I mean, like, How Stuff Works podcast just had actually an episode on that last week. It's kind of a problematic view, but it's also like that's how things work for women forever, and it's still something that still works to this day, you know. Men, you know, they've never historically married up to get rich. They've kind of recently been making less and less money. They've been going to college less because college is becoming too expensive. And so men are becoming like less educated, less wealthy, more likely to stay at home with their parents and not move out. There are all these kind of like high level metrics that end up very directly funneling down and feeding into they're unhappy with relationships. They can't find relationships. And then all of a sudden they're also at the same time in this like weird murky world of I feel like a failure. They're getting all these bizarre mixed signals of, oh, women are like love to be vulnerable, and all you have to do is like come and ask them for sex, because that's what the whole like the internet projects that all over the place. Like, so, you know, Victoria's Secret shut down, or basically like, you know, shut down a lot of their, is kind of a failing business model at this point, because they no longer can like project that women are this thing where they're submissive and they just want to look sexy for men, that's no longer a thing that works.
Right.
So like that sort of business model is failing, while there's like OnlyFans and all this whole other world that's completely giving a different signal. So culturally, men are seeing, oh, women aren't submissive anymore because, you know, Victoria's Secret is no longer doing that thing. Oh, but wait, OnlyFans is only this whole thing that's like it's women that look like they're the girl next door that just like love to take off their clothes for like a minimal amount of money. You know what I mean?
Right.
So there's completely mixed signals there. And then as a guy, when you feel like a failure, you just like might be genuinely truly confused by all of this.
Yeah.
Like I see it, like I'm like older and married, and so I'm not part of this world, but like I could see how this would be so confusing. And then an Andrew Tate type of character comes along and is like makes it all simple for you. Just like says the dumb shit that like you just really, really want to hear, and it's actionable because it's like get rich, you know. So I'm gonna get a stock account and I'm gonna get rich off stocks, get rich quick, you know.
Let me add a third prong into that too, which is that one of the things I was I'll give you a quick story, an anecdote. So I was at the lake the other day, and I'm swimming around. I'm like, you know, got a rope tied to me. I'm like towing some rafts, you know, just getting my workout in. And I'm coming up to shore, and I'm probably looking a little tired. And this little, you know, maybe like 8-10-year-old boy sees me, and he's hanging out with his dog in the water. And he shouts to me. He's like, "Hey, you need some help bringing your rafts in, man?" And I was like, "No, you know, I'm good, man. Thank you, though. Appreciate it. Nice offer." And I swim in, and immediately, and this kid has just got a sweetheart. You can tell in his face and his mannerisms, you know, everything. And as I'm unpacking my raft, his dad is just berating him, right? Like his dad is just like, "What are you doing? You know, why are you out there in the water with the dog? You need to be helping me load these rafts in." And I think one of the third prongs of the confusion is that we're entering the final generation of fathers that are by nature emotionally unavailable. That culturally,
interesting.
Yeah, that culturally you don't have the ability to create an efficient and real to life map of the way that people are connecting with each other, because it's based on an emotional, partially at least, well, with other people, I mean, almost mostly with an emotional intuitiveness. And for many generations in the United States, men were taught that is, you know, all the way back from the 50s, it's, you know, it's weak, but then up to the 80s, it's fucking gay, you know, and it became something that was immensely pejorative to be an emotionally aware creature as a male. And so you're receiving these mixed signals from the world around you, and then your primary role model, if you have a father, is, you know, maybe not always, but it's really likely to be somebody that has embedded this emotional disconnect as a function of their masculine role in the world. And I mean, let me just speak to something else real quick, which is gets back to Andrew Tate, which is that this idea of toughness, right? This idea of being a tough guy, you know, and using masculinity as the kind of frame for this is like, okay, you need to be masculine, you need to be tough. But then I was reflecting on this a lot, because one of the first things that comes up for me with Andrew Tate is how agitated he is, right?
Yeah.
He's so agitated. He's always yelling, and he's always trying to make a point, and he's just so fucking pissed off all the fucking time, you know? And I was reflecting on this, and I in my personal life, I've given this advice recently to both young men and young women, where it's like, okay, you know, another quick anecdote. I was talking to a young woman who works with my mom, and she was saying, well, all the boys in my class, they're always saying, they're always so angry, and they're always like, oh, I just want to kill myself. I fucking hate this so much. And I'm like, I want you to understand something, that they're performing a version of masculinity for you that they think is going to make you feel like they're tough. But let's just take a second. Wow,
that's totally insightful. Yeah.
Right? You know, and let's just take a second and look through the book of pop culture over the last 70 or 80 years. Let's look at James Dean. Let's look at Elvis. Let's look at a modern example, Ryan Gosling. these are all people that are pretty solidly upheld as cool guys, right? And
Mhm.
they all in a certain way perform masculinity and toughness in a way that's palatable to most people even now. What
Mhm.
are they? They're relaxed, Peter. They're relaxed.
Hmm.
And that is the in my mind, as I've been kind of decompartmentalizing masculinity over the last like 10 or 15 years, I'm looking for this place where I'm like, okay, we want to throw out this traditional version of masculinity because it seems toxic, but there's got to be something in here. We're biologically driven in certain ways, and we're socially driven in certain ways to enjoy certain aspects of femininity and certain aspects of masculinity. So what is the core of this positive masculinity? It's relaxed. It's
Hmm.
relaxed. It's unflapped, because
Yeah.
what is a more perfect way to show that you are a fearful, insecure individual than being constantly agitated, right? Like performing agitation as a function of masculinity is absurd when you go even one or two steps of removal down the thought process, because you got to figure, well, even traditionally going back to like, fuck, man, like, ancient male roles, which guy is getting like the hottest chick in the tribe? It's not the guy that's like complaining about how few mammoths there are. You know what I'm saying? It's the guy that's out there sharpening his spear, fucking trying to figure it out. You know what I mean? He's cool, people are freaking out, and he's like, no, we got this. But isn't that the quintessence of masculinity in a positive way? The we got this energy. Hey guys,
Wow.
we
Yeah.
got this. We
Yeah.
got this. Everybody
Totally.
just relax, and really, if you want to go a step further into what the modern version should look like, it's not I got this, right? Because we've taken that in a time. It's we got this. And
Hmm.
if I need to be the leader of this situation of making everybody feel like we got this, then I can be at the figurehead of that. But the figurehead has a pyramid below it, right? And even if you're at the top of that, the messaging that you have to be spreading to the people around you, whether they're male or female, masculine or feminine, or somewhere in between, is everybody just stay calm. We'll figure this out together. I might have some good ideas. I might have the best idea, but we all need to come together in a relaxed, efficient, and calm way, and we need to figure this out together.
That's great. No, I'm trying to like think of counterexamples to that, but I almost can't. I think that you kind of nailed the thing right there. I think that that's great.
I mean, I think that in a certain situation, Andrew Tate is speaking to a reality in which we still do live in a brutalist society. We still live in
Hmm.
a place where there's hierarchy and there's picking order. And as a man, it is one of my beliefs that you should be able to throw hands at some point. You know what I mean? If you had to, if you're in a desperate situation, you may want to be able to protect yourself. And that is something that you can use as a way to calm insecurities and fear in the world around you. If you're physically capable, physically fit, and maybe even if you can fight, then that is something still, unfortunately, in a
Hmm.
certain way, of value in this world. I've been in pickles. I bet you've been in pickles. Our friends have been in pickles where you maybe didn't need to fight, but knowing that you would be able to if you had to, there is some value to that.
Well, I'm
I
thinking of a weird, just in terms of your I think that the instinct to fight is kind of something that hopefully we will get past,
Me too.
all of us, because we only fight like quote good guys only kind of retain that instinct to fight just because there are so many bad guys. But the idea is to like get rid of the bad guys at some level. And that's like
Right.
the real underbelly problem that undergirds everything is we're always just everyone on Twitter, everyone on the news. We're all talking about like quote unquote like people who got their lives together, and like sometimes people fuck up on the edges, but like there's a whole underbelly of society of people who are like just not part of those conversations and really are fucking and that's why we retain these like we need to fight because the guy like breaking into your house at 4 a.m. with a knife and a gun, and that's so outside the norm that unfortunately that means that we still have to have a fight instinct in us for the moment.
Right.
Long term, hope we weed that out. But like kind of in terms of your the confidence and the I got this mentality. I'm kind of thinking of two other characters who've been in the news recently. One, Alex Jones, constantly agitated and
So
very much
agitated.
doing that like the angry white dude who is like the last scream of like this dying former rulers of society, right? That's kind of him.
Right.
That's what he represents.
Right.
Then, like, also not necessarily the greatest male character role model of all time, but like kind of a counter to that in the news as of yesterday from a new documentary, I think. Mike Tyson.
Sure.
And he's kind of like right now he's like an old man who like drops these like very confident aphorisms for men about like how to succeed and not be
Yeah.
a wimp and that sort of thing. And
Yeah.
he's like this kind of like stoic figure who's like
Yeah.
literally the toughest guy who might have ever lived ever. And he's
Right.
like this very calm. He talks so peacefully. He's stoned out of his mind most of the time, just very like a
Right.
Buddha type figure. And if I were a young guy and I'm like, okay, do I want Alex Jones's agitation
Right.
yelling at a camera, with zero coherence, or like this kind of like wise old man figure who literally was the toughest guy of all time? I don't know. Mike Tyson is kind of more appealing as a figure to like project yourself as you walk down the street in life, just being like, I know I am confident and I'm going to speak softly and just like project
Yeah.
confidence. That to me, rather than like, the Alex Jones thing. I don't know. That Mike
No,
Tyson is way more appealing.
I completely agree. And unfortunately, to my point, he did beat some dude's ass on an airplane like a couple weeks ago.
I know. That's why he's not really a good role model, but like kind of the image that he would project aside from the fact that he's probably kind of fucked up.
Right, right.
I
Yeah,
want to pivot a little bit actually, if it's
please.
okay, to the cancellation aspect of Andrew Tate.
Yeah.
Because I know that this is kind of like the tech angle here.
I
We've
love
never
the
really
video
talked
you
too
sent
much
me, by
about.
the way.
Oh, what's that?
I loved the video you sent me, by the way,
Oh, Vosh.
of his like penitent hat in hand, like complete tonal shift. He's like, yeah, like fucking like, it actually is a little serious when you get canceled because fucking everything goes away. And it's like, yeah, dog.
Well, I mean, I think that we've never really talked too much about, internet cancellations
Mm-hmm,
and deplatformings.
mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on that? Maybe we'll take Andrew Tate as the case study here, but in general too, I'm kind of curious your thoughts on like where social media platforms should draw that line when they deplatform someone versus not. Do you have any strong feelings on that question?
It's a complicated issue, and I'm gonna take a side, but at this point, the side that I'm gonna take, I'm gonna leave myself room to change my opinion.
Yeah.
I'm a bit of an American and I'm a bit of a capitalist. There's a lot of things about the system that I don't agree with, and I'd like to see a greater equity share in capitalist systems.
Mhm.
However, with social media platforms, man, I think whatever they want to do is whatever they want to do, man. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like as a private entity, I mean, there's this whole conversation that's going on right now. Like Twitter is the public square or the town hall, and Facebook is the only way that people connect anymore. And so we need to regulate these platforms. And I don't know that it's the government's job to do that. I think that if these people are running a company that became successful on the idea that they, you know, moderate, intercept, and platform social content, it's got to be up to them how they decide to police that. And there's this huge conversation about oversight and whether people should be allowed to be deplatformed or not. And my first thought is, well, then start a fucking Facebook. If Congress
Mhm.
or the government wants to regulate social media, then there should be a federal social media site. Because at the end of the day, it's not where we've been in this bubble for 10 years, man. We've had some platforms that have risen to prominence, and I am almost 100% confident that other platforms will rise to prominence in the next 10, 20 years. So I find it a little distasteful that there's a conversation around like, should these people be censored or should they not be censored? Is it okay to do, should we be letting everyone do free speech or not? And it's like, if free speech is protected under the Constitution in a federal way, where you can say whatever you want when you're in person, and then there's certain types of hate speech and calls to violence that you're not allowed to say in public. And the social media companies adhere to that relatively strictly. So I think that when someone is deplatformed, I have to support it. You know, I think that there's a little bit of a dark flavor to that with the rise of kind of extreme leftist woke politics, where, you know, people are being deplatformed for saying pretty simple things. You know, I think the dead naming thing for transgender folks is a pretty strange area of regulation where, you know, you can be deplatformed for that. But at the end of the day, it's up to these folks that are running their own companies to decide what's okay and what's not on their platforms.
Yeah, so largely I agree with all of that. Kind of my broad smattering thoughts that I'll just throw at you. One is that for some reason no one ever says this, but the solution or the deplatforming is they're going to be messy. There is no bright line. It's always going to be unfair at some level, you know, always, because it's gray and it's messy, and that's just simply the way that it's going to be. Given that, I think it's totally okay to disagree with any given deplatforming and to raise a stink about it and to explain why a deplatforming wasn't okay. And that's part of the conversation, and that's what keeps the whole thing alive and interesting and fluid in general too. But it's going to be messy, and if you are saying things that everyone doesn't like, no matter what the topic, no matter anything, and you get a big enough platform, you're gonna go down. That's just how it works. Yeah. If you're a total nobody, you can say literally anything you want. You might every now and then get a deplatform thing, but it's not gonna be a big deal because you got 20 followers, you start a new account, who cares, you know? But we're really talking about huge names. That's what we're talking about.
Sure.
And like, just don't say dumb shit that you know presses these sorts of types of buttons. It's not that hard. They're fairly basic rules. So that's a rant that I do. You know, the kind of where I come back on the other side of that is that the case of like the Iraq war, this is the talking point, but I totally agree with it. Back in the day, you know, if we were all on Twitter when the Iraq war was happening and we all were, you know, anybody who tweeted the government should not go into Iraq, they do not have weapons of mass destruction, they might have gotten canceled for that because it was against the prevailing narrative. Well, hey, guess what? It turned out that was true. And all those people who hypothetically would have gotten canceled for speaking the truth, you know, jokes on society for calling that wrong. So I think that that's a real worry that we don't want to. We should be able to say ideas that are kind of conspiratorial because, like, legit, the government lies to us, and like that's a reality, and we have to like live in the social media sphere knowing that at some time, at some point, at some level, the government might be projecting falsehoods. And so we have to leave open, I think, a pretty wide door to be able to say, I think that the government has this wrong. I think that that's a big deal. And in my mind, that's different from like the very messy social stuff of like people have gotten canceled, like you said, from saying a trans woman isn't a woman, a trans woman is a trans woman. Like just to a very tiny, minuscule fraction, not of the government, you know, but of like the woke left, the far fringes of the woke left. That's not what you're supposed to say, you know?
Right.
Like, but like that's a social conversation. We absolutely, there's no reason to, that's not the government hiding information from us. That's us messily figuring out what it means to be a human. That stuff, to me, there's no way I would ever say a social media platform should cancel someone for that. That's a messy social thing. Let's talk about it. We're humans and we talk about this stuff. So
Well,
do you think that there's a coherent line there where it's like the government, we should be able to say the government is wrong, even if it's a conspiracy thing, versus a messy societal thing? I don't know. What do you think about that as kind of a line?
well, immediately I'm drawn to the most recent example, which is coronavirus, right? We
Mhm.
had, and that is really
Yeah.
messy because it may not be that the government is intentionally withholding information from you. It may be that things are fluid and changing. And as, I mean, something that I've been kind of when coronavirus hit, I'm like, yeah, you know, you've got to get vaccinated. In a certain way, I was a proponent of vaccine mandates, and something that happened during the pandemic was so much of the speech around coronavirus that didn't fit the dead center narrative of you need to be vaccinated, and that's the only way to do this. A lot of that changed. You know, recently, I think, and I could be wrong about this. Maybe someone will fact check me, but I believe the CDC has recently admitted or come to the conclusion that your natural antibody response is as powerful as the vaccine, you know, or has a comparable effect on your immunity going forward in coronavirus. And that's something that 2 years ago you would have been absolutely roasted at the spit for, you know. And the other thing with coronavirus was that, you know, as folks are saying, the only way to be the only way to stay alive is to get this vaccine. And there was people on the other side saying, well, I'm never going to vaccine. There's also people in the middle that were having their speech censored by saying, hey, you know what else you can do? You can be a healthy human being. And it
Hmm.
really, really reduces your risks of every implication of this virus. And that to me is an inarguable truth. But because it didn't fit dead center with the narrative, and I think, you know, this is a bit conspiratorial, but I've been hearing people talk about, you know, the Biden administration and probably to less degree the Trump administration reaching out to social media platforms to try and control the narrative around it because they wanted everybody to become vaccinated. And I see both sides of this. I see, yes, we had no idea. It looked like it was fucking killing everybody. The vaccines looked like the solution. We're 2 years down the path now, and that to me seems like it was a huge impediment to the actual ability to fight and combat the virus, whether it's being healthy or whether it was having treatments, not just a vaccine, having at home, you know, remedial steps that you can take to lower your impact. I don't think a lot of that stuff was able to surface into the public consciousness because the vaccine mandate was something that was so heavily guarded and pushed by the federal government and to that extent by social media
Yeah, I
companies.
mean, I just jump in a little. I totally agree with most of that, except
Mm-hmm.
for I do think that like telling people to get healthy, it's too little, too late. Like who out there who's weighing 300
Fair,
pounds is literally gonna be
fair.
like, oh my God, there's a virus, as if like viruses haven't always been around, as if
Right,
the common
fair.
cold isn't just as deadly for you when you weigh 300 pounds and have asthma, right?
Right, right, right.
So I think that like saying that like because Bill Maher talked about this and Joe Rogan talked about this. Totally agree. But that's like a long-term 10-year plan. That's not for like the
Right,
virus you're going to
right.
catch next month. Get the vaccine. Modern
Yeah,
science like is awesome. Like
yeah,
we're alive today because of modern science. That's so many
right.
levels, you know? And I think that like being science gets things wrong, and they got a lot of stuff wrong with coronavirus. Part of the scientific process is getting things wrong and learning from it. And I respect that. And being respectful of that is like just like kind of going along with it, you know, and criticizing it, but you know, also going along with it. But the other side of that, the conspiratorial side, hey, they get things wrong all the time too, but they don't
Right.
learn from it. You know, like
Sure.
what conspiracy theorists do you ever see being like, oh, I got all this stuff wrong, so I'm going to learn
Right,
from that and I'm
right.
going to refine my thing. I'm going to take in the newest data, even so I have to completely change my thing, and now I'm on board with like the science. That never, ever, ever happens, and that's why science is better,
Do you
and
think,
science
and
works.
as a vaccinated person, right? Myself, do you think that? I mean, take a side for or against the censorship of coronavirus misinformation over the last 2 years, or misinformation, whatever you want to kind of consider it.
Yeah, great question. It's a little bit case by case for me, because one of the things that people always said, was like, oh, you're going to get canceled if you say this. And then they said it and didn't get canceled. So it's like, I think that, I mean, I listened to Brett Weinstein on this. I listened to Joe Rogan on this. I listened to everything, you know. I also listened to CNN and Dr. Fauci. I listened to all of it. I could kind of tell, I'm not an idiot. I could tell when Dr. Fauci was just saying the politically convenient thing. I'm also not an idiot, and I would listen to Joe Rogan. I could realize that he was having some kooks on who weren't half as qualified as they were projecting that they were. You know what I mean? So like, I'm a little bit like, just, you know, let it all play out. You know, I also don't think the cancellations were nearly as bad as like Joe Rogan or Bill Maher said that they were, just because like, I spent time on Twitter, and every day on Twitter, people never shut the fuck up about how the vaccine is terrible for you and you're going to die if you get it. Meanwhile, I got 3 of them and I'm like healthier than ever. You know what I mean? So,
yeah, maybe it becomes like a question of, do we dither the narrative down to the least intelligent person? Like, do we make allowances in society for people that are not willing to sift through multiple news sources and data, and are much more accustomed to digesting news from a single source, whether it be true or not? You know, are we?
Yeah, I mean, like, really, I truly think this is kind of not the exact topic, but like, I don't think that the problem was the social media discourse. I think that it was the Fox News thing, because, you know, my mom told me about a friend of hers who's like mid to late 70s, not in tip-top health, but watched Fox News every day, and because of that wouldn't get the vaccine, you know? And that demographic, you know, people are on Twitter arguing about things, you know, most of them are probably going to get vaccinated, even if they're signaling that they're not, because it's a signaling thing, and they're all probably young and blah, 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 blah. But the Fox News audience is old, they're unhealthy, and they are sheep who don't see both sides. They have their little tribe, and that's it, you know? And I mean, I don't know, like, I almost don't get, although this sounds horrible to some people, I'm sure, but I kind of don't understand why, like, some adult, whether it's the government or the CDC or something, doesn't call up Fox News like Rupert Murdoch and be like, look, dude, I know you need to get your viewership or whatever, but please, dear God, you have old, unhealthy people in your audience, like the majority of them. Can you please tone down your bullshit? Because you know they all got vaccinated. Everyone at Fox News you couldn't enter that door without being vaccinated, right? Meanwhile, they're signaling don't get vaccinated is going to kill you. Like, that is just propaganda at a level that I think is just like really just gross. You know, it makes me feel gross, the thought that they would go into work every day and do that. That's a little bit different from the cancellation social media thing, but way bigger deal to me, because I think that caused so much more harm, the Fox News thing. I don't know what you do about that, because I don't think the CDC, I don't know, I mean, they're a private business, they can do whatever the fuck they want to, but like the CDC, I think, shit, they should have called up Sean Hannity and be like, dude, what, like, please, you know this is bullshit, please. I don't know.
Well, and maybe it draws a useful comparison to the idea of censoring social media. You're going to put government pressure on censoring information at you know, a digital, you can't, because you're not censoring Fox News, and they have a huge audience and they have a huge viewership, and you treat them as an independent company that is able to adhere to their own set of guidelines as to what content they promote and push. And I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but I would guess that you know a comparable section of Americans that have right-wing overlap are on both social media and on and listening to Fox News. So if you're gonna really push the censorship narrative, you got to go after everybody, buddy. You can't just go after the low-hanging fruit in an industry that has gray areas and looser laws. The only reason why they don't go after Fox News, I think, in a political climate like that is because broadcast television has laws around it that are very well codified.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's easy to go after the digital space because it's a frontier space, and you can try to make anything happen in there that you feel is right.
So in our last few minutes, Andrew Tate, cancel or no cancel? What would you do?
Personally, cancel. You know, as a person that cares about the minds and hearts of young men and young. I think that's fine. I think that's a good thing. I don't think it's just fine. I think it's a great thing. I think that when somebody is pushing a narrative that is clearly hateful, clearly destructive, clearly damaging the fabric of society, it's okay. It's okay to cancel that person. As you know, like whatever, like a free speech constitutionalist or whatever, I think maybe I would feel I think that there's like an ideological and a practical separation for me, where ideologically I would say, I don't know if anybody should get canceled, because whatever, man, if somebody is speaking to societal ills, taking that person out of the equation isn't really doing anything to fix the problem. It's a psychological issue that young people are dealing with that needs to be addressed. We don't have that type of societal cohesion where we can identify a problem and then, put structures in place that are helping young men figure out how to make it through a really confusing time. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think, fuck yeah, man, it's a private company, cancel the motherfucker, I think, unfortunately, there is a ton more Andrew Tates that maybe aren't as loud, that are still going to have a huge voice with young men. And at the end of the day, it's speaking to something that is, I don't know, maybe a sickness or a temporary illness in the minds of young people. And ideologically, I would say, well, then start messaging something good. Ideologically, I'd say let the guy say whatever he wants to say and meet him on the battlefield of ideas and present ideas that are more compelling and more intellectually satisfying and even more maybe viscerally satisfying. Like just being a cool guy, man, just being fucking relaxed. Like it's so easy to tear this dude down, man. Like, yeah. So yeah, I think there's I'm a bit of two minds on it, but my kind of the hammer falls for me on the side of private companies can do whatever the fuck they want. Mm-hmm. And the personal side, the hammer falls for me. I want to see everybody that tells young men to be hateful to women. I want them all deplatformed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm gonna agree with you on this. I mean, I started out because I always start out on no, they shouldn't have canceled him. Why? Like, sure. Let people say what they want. Who cares? That sure. Always, that's my default. Then I heard some of the specific things that he said, because he said something, and I'm just like, oh, so this actually broke the rules. This broke the, when you sign up for your social media account, you agree to certain terms. He broke those terms in ways that aren't just kind of like, oh, slap on the wrist. Maybe. But like, oh, with your follower count, with that sort of account, it comes a little bit of responsibility. Yeah. That's like the unspoken truth about social media. Once you have millions of followers, the rules actually apply to you, because you have responsibility. You are CNN, you are Fox News when you're that big. So the rules are, and you have to be mature and be an adult about it and realize that you're making a ton of money off of this. So yes, you follow the rules. And he said so many things that broke the rules. So that to me is kind of easy in that sense. Once I saw what he said things that I'm like, oh, like men could kill people because of the things that he said. if any given angry failure-ish young man actually took advice, they would be assaulting women every night at the bar. Literally, and that's just no society, like no matter the platform, whether it's at the actual town square or a school or a college or a workplace or literally anywhere that we interact with people, no one would be okay with this guy saying what he said in
Yeah,
public. He was in
yeah,
public. He was on social media. That's part of like the public square. He can't say that shit. Sorry. And he knew that. And he still,
yeah,
and like, here's the thing. He could have said his same message, but without saying really violent things,
yeah,
and he would still
yeah,
be on those platforms. You know,
yeah,
his message isn't the thing he got canceled for. It's a bad message. It's dumb, but like that's not. It's like you said. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. It's the specific things that he said, man. And it's like if you're gonna
Ooh,
say that specific, really awful things, like,
brutal.
dude, no, like you're off. And you asked for it. You were begging
Yeah,
and pleading them for to turn you off, and so you got turned off. There you go. So that's kind of like my take. I know that there are like I have a lot of friends who are way more like free speech y. I consider myself very free speech y. I'm just a realist, and I'm like, yeah, like Trump started his Truth Social. Guess what? He has terms of service, and guess what? They're
yeah.
way more weird and incoherent and stricter in many ways than Twitter. So that's how it goes, and live with it, everyone.
Final thought on Andrew Tate. You're a small man. You're a total fucking pussy. You're obviously an insecure person. And at the end of the day, buddy, part of mental toughness and part of being tough is confronting the aspects of self that make you so agitated. So, maybe incorporate a more holistic version of toughness into your worldview, and some of the more positive, if any, aspects of what you're saying could shine through. But come on, buddy, fuck you.